Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media.
Today on Spotlight, SLU researchers identify a biomarker for severe liver disease in infants. Find out what this breakthrough means. Plus, fall is synonymous with fairs. We'll tell you about some of St. Louis's best. And then meet one artist who does leather work and another who uses paper to create unique shadow boxes. But first, she's an award-winning young shark scientist with a new book. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
It's all about sharks now. So for back to school, let's just focus on sharks and only sharks.
Of course, some people go to school to study sharks. That's how Jasmine Graham became a marine biologist, specializing in sharks.
They're just really cool. They're so cool.
But as a woman of color in a field that is mostly male and white, she has also had to deal with more than a few human sharks.
We tend to think of science as being very objective, but science is done by people, and people have biases, people have prejudices.
That's why Graham helped create a group to bring more women and people of color into the field, and it seems to be working.
It gives me hope that this is changing and that there are a lot of people that recognize that this is a problem and they want to be informed about it and they want to start dealing with it.
Jasmine Graham's new book, Sharks Don't Sink, focuses on more than just social justice issues. It also tells tales from her adventures in science, trying to save a species most people fear, even though it's people, who are killing the shark population at an alarming rate.
I mean, sharks have been there for 450 million years. We have no idea what happens when you take sharks out of the ocean. The ocean has not known a world without sharks for 450 million years. Do you want to find out what happens whenever you take an animal like that out of the ocean? I sure don't.
I don't think there are river sharks, are there?
Not up here.
Okay, well, glad to know that. The subhead of the book is Adventures of a Rogue Shark Scientist. What is a rogue scientist?
Rogue shark scientist is really whatever you want it to be. That's the beautiful thing about going rogue. So stepping outside of academia and these sort of larger institutions and trekking out on your own, which gives you a lot of flexibility in what you research and what you do and how you conduct that research and who you work with. And that's really what it means to be rogue.
So you're kind of your own boss.
Yes, I am my own boss. It's great.
What's interesting is that people are so fascinated by sharks.
They're incredibly old. So, I mean, mind-boggling facts here. So they've been on this planet for about 450 million years. That is longer than dinosaurs. They were here before trees. Sharks were even on planet Earth before Saturn had rings, which is really mind-boggling and hard to understand. And the fact that they've been here so long and they actually haven't changed that much relatively. I mean, dinosaurs came and went, and the closest relative we have is a chicken. So we went from a dinosaur to a chicken. And you look at a shark 450 million years ago, and you can still identify it as a shark. It still looks very shark-like. And so I think it's really cool that something could evolve that well, that it doesn't need to change very much for 400 million years. That's wild to me. They must be doing something right. And then I also have this soft spot for underdogs. So sharks are really hated and really treated like monsters and these mindless killing machines in media. And I've always felt that's not fair, because what happened to the sharks' PR people? I mean, killer whales and dolphins got like Flipper and Free Willy, and sharks got Jaws. That doesn't feel very fair.
Yeah, they're not trying to eat these people. They're just sort of curious. What's that? Oh,
yeah, they're kind of like toddlers. They investigate things with their mouths. If you've ever seen a toddler, first thing they do is put something in their mouth. Sharks don't have hands, so they have to try things with their mouths. That's how they feel things. We're losing shark species at an alarming rate. So there are some species of sharks that we've lost upwards of 70% of their population. We have more and more sharks being listed as endangered every year. We've lost some species we don't even know we lost because we lost them and they went like that in a blink of an eye. And so it's a real challenge to kind of balance this fear that people have with this animal with their need for protection, because it's really hard to convince people to protect something that they're afraid of or that they view as evil or out to get them. So it's just really important that we see sharks in this full view and not this one-dimensional representation that we have right now.
To hear the funny story about how she got into studying sharks, which involves her literally running into someone, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
They are the best-selling authors and all of your favorite genres. For in-depth, one-on-one interviews, go to hecmedia.org.
It's one of the most precious times in life when nothing is supposed to go wrong.
We never wanted this diagnosis, but I look at my daughter and she is perfectly made. And she's wonderful, and I'm so grateful.
Erin Carr's baby girl Tess was born with a liver disease. Erin would soon learn so much about it, but what she didn't know would sometimes be terrifying to think about. She couldn't even speak its name.
It took a year before I could say Alpha 1 out loud. I just said, well, you know the thing, because it felt like the boogeyman was going to get us, and I couldn't run fast enough.
Alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency.
There it is. Those words parents like Erin hear for the first time.
For short, we call Alpha 1. It's a genetic disease. It affects about 1 in 3,500 Americans. Their liver makes an abnormal kind of Alpha 1. The liver has too much. The abnormal protein builds up in the liver. With Alpha 1, most people are not diagnosed, or many people are misdiagnosed. Alpha 1 can cause a wide range of health problems, from childhood through old age. It can cause liver damage, it can cause lung disease in adults, and rarely can cause skin problems and other conditions. There's a small group of infants where the liver gets very, very sick. It can be life-threatening. Sometimes the child even needs a liver transplant to survive. We have documented a number of deaths nationwide from Alpha 1.
From their home in North Carolina, Erin now travels with Tess once a year to see Dr. Jeffrey Techman at SSM Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital in St. Louis.
Her liver was sick soon after birth. She's done well, but we know from our studies that there's still a risk of liver damage and serious disease. It suffers from a lack of treatments, and that's what we're trying to do, develop new treatments where there are none.
Because of Dr. Techman's leading role with a series of groundbreaking collaborative research, including the discovery of the first possible treatment for Alpha 1, Erin can now say the name of the disease she so overwhelmingly feared.
We very likely will have either a treatment or a cure for this.
We now, fortunately, are at a point where multiple new drugs are entering treatment trials in 2024 and 2025. So it's very exciting.
At his St. Louis University School of Medicine laboratory, Alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency is his life's work, his mission. And because of all the research for new treatments that this professor of pediatrics and biochemistry and microbiology has done year after year, Erin can smile more, like she never could before. Tess is now 5 years old, in kindergarten.
If you didn't look at her lab work, you wouldn't know that anything is wrong.
And Erin has so much hope for Tess's future. But there was one more hurdle Dr. Techman had to overcome that could have helped Erin handle her situation better 5 years ago, when Tess was a baby.
I probably wouldn't have felt though the boogeyman was going to get us.
We have been unable to predict which infants and children would go on to life-threatening disease and which would do well. And as we test new drugs, it's very, very important.
Techman went after that missing piece of the puzzle for families like Erin's.
It's a math problem, a mathematical method to predict who's going to do badly and who's going to do well.
It worked. Techman is the senior author of a study successfully identifying biomarkers for severe Alpha 1 liver disease in infants.
Can give us a prediction of small children that 10 years in the future might have life-threatening disease or not.
As a mom who just feels scared, knowledge is power. And it might not be the answer you want, but at least you can make a plan for your baby, for your child, to help take care of them versus just not knowing.
The next phase of Dr. Techman's study is expected to help older children like Tess.
We have built an even more powerful model that will help us understand how kids do, which we're going to be working on for the rest of 2024 and into 2025. Hopefully that will be ready just about the time that children will need to be enrolled in some of these new drug treatment trials. I'm very optimistic that liver transplants and death from alpha-1 within the next few years will be a thing of the past. I think this is going to be a tremendous success story in medicine, that we're going to be able to cure this disease, and we're going to be able to know who's going to get sick and who isn't, and why that is, and answer questions that we've been wondering about for 50 years.
Later on Spotlight, treasures from one of the largest showboats to ever travel the Mississippi.
The Best of Missouri Market is the first weekend in October, and we've been having the Best of Missouri Market here at the Missouri Botanical Garden for more than 30 years. It's a wonderful fall tradition that gives you a chance to shop local vendors from throughout the state of Missouri for all kinds of wonderful handcrafted products. There's lots of food, cheeses, produce, there's local artwork you can purchase, craft goods, jewelry, there's candles. For adults, we do have cocktails, beer, and wine to sample and to purchase. We'll have a food court with food trucks so you can have a bite to eat from local favorites like Grace and Eaton 3. And then for the kids, we have a whole kids corner where there's pumpkin painting, our pumpkin patch, a petting zoo, all of your favorite children's activities that we offer each year. The Missouri Botanical Garden has been here in St. Louis since 1859, and we're very connected to the local community. So the Best of Missouri Market is just a chance to show off all of the local community has to offer. It is the perfect multi-generational event, so you can bring grandma and grandpa, bring your kids. There's shopping, there's food, there's drinks, there's crafts for the kids, other children's activities. There's something for everyone to do here.
The Best of Missouri Market will be held from October 4th through the 6th. For more details, visit mobot.org. After enjoying the market, head over to the historic Shaw Art Fair, taking place just east of the Missouri Botanical Garden on October 5th and 6th.
One of the cool things about the fair is because we're in these 2 blocks of Flora Place, that's such a beautiful setting, number one. But secondarily, it's really a space that allows you to relax and enjoy what you're seeing, but also interact with the artist. So you can talk with the artist and spend time with them, finding out more about their work. Most of them are very happy to share what it is they do, how they do it. It makes for a wonderful visitor experience, and we hear that a lot from visitors, that they really like the ambiance of this space and how they can interact with the artist. And these are people from across the country. Many of them, although, are from the St. Louis region. In fact, we're getting more regional artists over the years, and that's kind of a shift for, I think, art fairs in general. So the fair offers a broad range of art. We've got printmaking, painting, ceramics, fiber art, sculpture, there's woodworking, and digital art, as well as mixed media art, and jewelry. So what you're going to find is something I think that suits everyone, frankly. So that's probably the main reason to come down here, is see the really great art. Now, the other amenities that we have live music both days, and we've got some exciting bands. A lot of this stuff will ultimately be at shawartfair.org as well. There's a list of artists already out there, and we'll have a list of bands. We also have a full food court with a beverage tent as well. And there'll be a combination of food trucks and actual tent vendor food as well. So some local restaurants are going to be involved, some catering folks will be involved. We have a children's area as well, so local schools will participate in that, showing work from their students, which is always a lot of fun. The Historic Shaw Art Fair is on the 41 and 4200 blocks of Flora Place, just east of the Missouri Botanical Garden. And for ticket information, please see shawartfair.org.
So my name's Kristen. I'm a leather worker in St. Louis. I'm originally from Massachusetts. Moved here a couple of years ago and now have a brick and mortar on Jefferson. So I use all traditional leatherworking techniques to create modern and minimal leather goods. It's a craft that used to be really prevalent in like the 70s and has died out over the years with like fast fashion, but there's a slow reemergence. And I just think that's really exciting to use this craft that has been around for ages and employ traditional techniques to put my own spin on it. So I craft leather bags, I do a lot of crossbodies, backpacks, small accessories, wallets. So I started leatherworking because I wanted to make bags for myself, so I was really my first customer. So I use traditional techniques, but my leather bags are a lot more feminine. I use less traditional leather colors and leather types. To make my bags, I basically start with a design. So I have designs that I've created and cut out, and then I go ahead and pick the leather hide that I want to use. I sketch it out, hand cut, glue, stitch, and then I do a process called saddle stitching. One needle goes in one hole, and then there's a needle on the other side of the thread that goes into that same hole as well. It creates a really durable stitch that can't be replicated by a machine, and that's something I like to preserve the leather craft. Art fairs are a huge thing that keeps my business alive. I think especially with leather, it's really good for the customer to be able to see the bags in person. You can touch the leather, smell the leather. It's a very tactile product. So it's harder to make that translate online, and I love when people can come into my booth and see the products, try it on, see me working. Often at art shows, I will bring stitching, so I'll be working in the back, and then they can come in, ask questions, and they can actually see me at work. I'm really excited to share my work in person with you, and I hope to see you soon.
My name is Amy Cook. I do mixed media shadow boxes. They're made mostly of paper, but there's also fabric and clay, sticks, just a little bit of everything. My mom was a very good fabric artist. I always woke up to the sound of a sewing machine. So I had a dollhouse in her studio area, and I used all the scraps of everything I could find of making everything out of every type of material. So then my journey started many years later when I fell in love with paper. I was doing the paper flowers, making it all the upcycled, recycled. I loved all the maps and books, and then fell in love with putting pieces together on a canvas, but then I felt like it didn't really tell the story enough. I thought of the stages that were at the Muni when I worked there, and how you're transformed with just the one stage can become so many different places and a different time era. And I thought, wouldn't that be cool if I put them in like a shadow box? They almost become like their own little stage, and that's when it really came together for me. My pieces are inspired by a lot of my favorite things. I take like a simple thing or a favorite childhood memory, like sailing, and then thought, well, what would make it even more fun is to have a bunch of dogs in it. And then you think about that feeling that you get when you're sailing and you feel like you're flying, so I need a boat that flies, and what would make it fly? Your creative mind is just always going, let's put balloons, and it can't be a dog that's flying, it needs a goose in the front because a goose can fly. So it's an idea that just keeps going and going and going. Make it more magical. So some of my favorite pieces are the boats that are flying. There's so many different materials in them. The fabric and the clay and the paper mache and cardboard. It really encompasses a lot of things. And then the background with a color gradient. I love the dreamy night sky, and all the splatter of paint I think makes it really fun and whimsical. When people walk into the booth, I feel like the message is so easily received because people start to laugh and giggle. Some people even tear up. They're just so magical and whimsical and inspirational. I love seeing that joy of expression on their face.
HEC Media, recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell from the Missouri Historical Society, and this is History Spotlight. Completed in 1874, the Eads Bridge was the first bridge across the Mississippi River in St. Louis. Public historian Andrew Wonko tells us why engineers felt that building it was an impossible feat.
In the years immediately following the American Civil War, St. Louis was growing at an unbelievably rapid pace. We were right in the middle of the country, situated on one of the biggest rivers in the continent. But St. Louis had a huge problem. That river that brought all of these goods to and from the city was also becoming this huge barrier as railroads were growing, as the new way things were transported around the country. All of the railroads connecting St. Louis to eastern cities had to stop on the Mississippi's banks, and all of those goods had to be ferried across one at a time to get them into St. Louis itself. This was a huge problem that was holding St. Louis back from becoming an even bigger city. St. Louis knew it needed a bridge across the Mississippi River, and the bridge that we got came from one of the most brilliant mechanical minds St. Louis has ever known. James Eads was no stranger to the Mississippi River. When he was 13 years old, he watched all of his family's belongings sink in a steamboat accident right off of the St. Louis levee. After that, he invented a diving bell that allowed him to go down and search for steamboat wrecks on the bottom of the Mississippi. He built ironclad gunboats for the Union Army during the Civil War. His life was tied to the river. But in 1867, he got the commission to build the Mississippi River Bridge at St. Louis. Probably the most fascinating thing about it was that he was a man who had never built anything resembling a bridge any time in his life before, so he certainly knew what kind of stakes he was up against. The Eads Bridge was an engineering marvel like none that had come before. This bridge would leap across the Mississippi River on two piers that spanned 500 feet each. This was shocking and amazing, this length of distance that this bridge was going to be able to cover. But even more amazing was that Eads would use steel to do it. Steel in the 1860s was a metal that was still as much alchemy as science. People did not trust it. They really didn't know what kind of power it had. And when people looked at the plans for the Eads Bridge, this looked skeletal, it looked weak. People thought it was going to fall over just under its own weight. They had no idea what James Eads knew, how strong steel truly was, and what kind of incredible weight it could support. The Eads Bridge took from 1867 all the way to 1874 to build, and again was an engineering marvel unlike any other. When it finally did open, people were still very nervous about it, so James Eads knew a good PR stunt when he saw one. He actually walked a trained circus elephant across the bridge because the widespread belief at the time was that an elephant would not set foot on something that it knew was unstable. If that wasn't enough, at the bridge's opening, he parked 14 fully loaded locomotives on the bridge at the same time just to prove how unbelievably strong it truly was. It still stands 150 years later and is still one of the icons of the city of St. Louis.
Next week on History Spotlight, we dive into the architecture of Soldiers Memorial and discover why it's considered an architectural gem.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org. You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
The Goldenrod showboat was a fixture on the St. Louis riverfront for decades. But today, all that remains of the largest showboat ever to travel the Mississippi River is jammed into a couple of storage lockers in Jerseyville, Illinois.
Got a sample here of some of the old wallpaper from the showboat. They've got sheet music in here. The big chandelier from the theater is right here. You know, telling the story about it, you know, it makes me light up because it's Americana. It's history that you cannot replicate anywhere else. We have all the stage lights from the showboat.
Jake Medford was never on the showboat in its heyday. He's only 27 years old. But much of his youth has been spent getting to know the Goldenrod in her dotage.
When I got involved and started getting on board more and more, that's when you really fall in love with the place, and it was just amazing.
By day, Jake runs his family's gas stations and serves as the minister at Jerseyville's Church of Christ. But much of his free time is spent saving the Goldenrod's soul.
It had a rough life going throughout history, but the amazing thing is these showboats were built to last roughly 10 to 15 years. That's all they would last. But this one lasted, you know, much, much longer.
She endured crashes, fire, and foreclosure, and yet the Goldenrod continued cruising through 15 states, from 1909 until 1937, when she docked in St. Louis for repairs and ended up staying for more than 50 years. Then, in 1989, the city of St. Charles bought the goldenrod and moved the showboat to their riverfront. But within a few years, the need for expensive repairs brought down the curtain. In 2008, the goldenrod was donated to the St. Louis-based Historic Riverboat Preservation Association, and they moved it to a private mooring in Campsville, Illinois, hoping to raise enough money to bring the goldenrod back to life. And Campsville is where Jake Medford, who was 19 at the time, first discovered the goldenrod when he and a friend thought it would be fun to climb aboard and take pictures.
Once we took the photos, that's when we started taking time to look up the history. And the more that him and I did research on it, we were attracted to it more and more.
Jake got in touch with the preservation group to see if they wanted any of his pictures. Turned out what they needed was someone who lived near the boat to be its caretaker. Jake got the job.
We kept a sample of each glass that was on the showboat.
The idea was to try to keep the boat intact while raising money to restore it. But in 2014, while trying to reposition the boat at the mooring site, the hull was damaged beyond repair. And that's when the decision was made to start removing all the artifacts.
We have some of the costumes still. A lot of people will recognize some of this from the ceilings. Apparently another prop, you know.
Once all the artifacts had been removed, the plan was to dismantle the rest of the boat, store the lumber, and someday rebuild it. But on October 26, 2017, that plan was dashed when the goldenrod mysteriously caught fire.
I was lost. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I know things don't go out with dignity, but that was just horrible.
A few spent fireworks were found around the boat, but no one has ever really figured out what caused it to burn.
We kept everything we could. This is an old menu.
Now the plan is to find a museum interested in exhibiting what remains of the grandest showboat ever to travel the rivers of America.
Keeping its story alive, that's important, because otherwise it's going to be lost forever. I never gave up on it, no. And that's why I'm still here.
Next week, inside the charitable foundation of the PGA, how they use golf to help veterans. Plus, dive into the architecture of Soldiers Memorial, why this is considered a gem. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.